I do wonder, my friends, that here, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, that we have celebrations like Christmas, not for the really obvious reasons, but because I'm just going to turn you around, because it is really, really, really dark here. You know, because we don't really think about it, but good old England is actually really, really far north, and we are in climes where it gets very, very cold. And I've sort of been struggling to get myself going, but I did actually venture out for a really lovely walk earlier on. But I do think that we celebrate Christmas with abundance and aplomb, because we need that the brightness of the colourful lights and all of the food, you know, to stop us from freezing over. But the last couple of days, I have to say that I felt kind of heavy, because in my earlier years, I really did rush around a lot, trying to keep momentum going, and how are we going to deal with this latest crisis? Martin's got to keep the energy up. Martin's got to keep smiling. Martin's got to keep, carrying on. And the truth is, it's all caught up with me in the last few years. And obviously on this channel, I have talked a lot about splitting with my ex and the various traumas and and roller coaster activity that went with that particular relationship. I'm now at a point where I realise how I succumbed to putting myself into that situation, but I have a more profound sense of time and place with it, that it is gradually and more easily now being relegated to my past, because I realised that everything that happened around COVID was very, very much a closing of a chapter, and after many, many, many years of wanting to do it, I'm actually finally moving back to this village, and actually the peripheral triumph of convincing my parents to move back up here, which will be happening in the new year. And I feel a profound sense of gratitude for that, and accomplishment as well, because I really want my family to be together again. And my sister and her boyfriend are still down south and probably will be for some time. But that to me actually is the next stage of, at some point, that we can all be up here together and see each other more often, and do it in a nice, relaxed way, in a really beautiful setting. And what I realise is there are three things that are really, really important in life. And one of them is pace, one of them is peacefulness, and one of them is prosperity. And there's purpose, obviously, as well in there. That things happen at the right time, but it doesn't mean that you don't invest in the things that are right. And I know that my parents both took a lot of persuasion, another P, a lot of persuasion to actually make the move back up here. But my moving back, I saw very much as a catalyst. And it was something that I could actually take responsibility for. And there was, I've talked about this as well, there was resistance to it, there was doubt about it. Well, certainly that was expressed to me about my prospective move. But there wasn't any doubt actually for me. It didn't even really feel like a choice to come back up here. Various things happened, including the relationship with my ex in London, but certain other quite traumatic things did happen, and I might talk about those at some point, not now. But once certain things had happened, I thought, right, okay, I've just got to do it now. It's not really a choice, it's a stepping stone. It's absolutely the next phase of my life that I need to move back to surroundings that I'm happy in. But it's really important to have that sense of purpose and to do it peacefully, because one of the things that I realized that I've done in the past in order to make myself heard is I've screamed and I've shouted and I've tried many different ways of making myself heard. But the reality is that rather than talking about things, well, we have to get doing things. And that's where most people stumble or completely stagnate, because it can be frightening to venture out for yourself. But this is where purpose comes in, where you get to a point where you can't deny what it is that you're feeling anymore, as hard as you try and push it down, keeps bobbing back up to the surface and saying, hello, remember me? This is the authentic path that you should be walking, Martin. This is who you really are. This is what you really want. And that's the moment, I think, that you become an adult. And most people they're not really doing that. There are a lot of people going through the motions. They're doing the done thing. And I'm not even judging those people. But when you actually talk with a lot of people who are living so-called regular lives and have real conversations with them, you actually find out that people are really creative and ambitious. They had ideas for their lives that never turned out in the way that they thought they would. And I'm not saying people aren't necessarily happy, but we each have a divine spark within us. And I think it's absolutely essential, if you're going to have a good life, a purposeful and prosperous life, that you need to invest in the things that you love. I feel it's my job and my duty to remind people of that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a great, glorious and grandiose thing. It can actually be subtle. It doesn't have to be forced. It doesn't have to be a race. It doesn't have to be stressed or panicked. It can be something that you invest in, whatever it is that brings you joy, and it can make each of your days or each of your weeks or whatever time period, it can make them brighter. It can give them a boost and a lift. But what it requires is that you are proactive about your life and you become conscious, because much of our early life is so orchestrated and regimented, and we get carried along the conveyor belt, and most people do that all the way to the grave. But if you can be your own pattern interrupt, and you can say, right, okay, there are things that I really love doing, I'm going to devote time to those things. And that might be tricky depending on the people that you have in your life. Certain people might not want you to, venture from that supposedly safe and steady and secure path. But to me, that's a life wasted. And I have huge ambitions in myself, and I've experienced a lot of frustration when things haven't been going in exactly the way that I thought that they might, and they might not be moving as quickly as I want. But the best thing that you can do is to actually start now. Carve out a bit of time for yourself and do that consistently. And I think you'll have a lot more satisfaction, a lot more joy. And you can take things that feel impossible or dreamlike, and you can make them realities. I'm here to remind you that despite it maybe being a bit or a lot difficult, it is possible. And at the close of the year, I don't want you to think about endings. What I want you to think about is beginnings. The beginnings of an even better life that you deserve.